Our major focus on this program for now has been on the impact of coronavirus on all aspects of life in Nigeria. However, with the extended lockdown in parts of the country coming to an end, we consider it fitting to redirect that focus to the likely scenarios when the present economic constrictions are loosened. And we will be starting with that right now by talking to Laoye Jaiyeola, Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Jaiyeola is a graduate of economics from Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. He holds a master's degree in banking and finance from the University of Lagos. A one-time president of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. He is also a member, Chartered Institute of Bankers Scotland, and a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you too for joining us. Now, we've been talking about prospects for Nigeria post-COVID-19. And the president had set up an economic sustainability committee led by the vice president to begin to think ahead in terms of options that will be available to Nigeria. The CBN governor also most recently wrote an essay in which he outlined a number of possible steps. The president has also further directed the Economic Advisory Council to work together with ministers and also that committee that is led by the vice president. Yes, certainly the economy is adversely impacted by COVID-19 and by the crisis with oil prices. But as somebody who has been studying the Nigerian economy as a lifelong engagement, what priorities will you recommend to government? What kind of emphasis would you like to see in trying to move Nigeria beyond COVID-19 and ensuring rapid economic recovery?
Thank you again for having me. There's no doubt that the world now faces a new normal. After COVID, almost everywhere in the world is estimated to have a decline, a contraction in the GDP. There are projections that Nigeria can contract for as much as 3% this year. And oil is not available any longer. And there are significant supply disruptions all over the world. So what do we need to do? There has been a call on everybody to diversify. Yes, our GDP economy is diversified, but whether are we getting sufficient value from the diversification is thing we need to address. Now, if you look at the actions that have been taken by both the CBN and finance, we'll still need to sit down and ask ourselves whether they are sufficient. No doubt there was a need to pump the economy and pump a lot of money to the economy. But more than anything, there is a need for us to go into some key priority areas. How do we make agri to begin to add significant value? How do you ensure that those sectors that are the telecom sector, how do we sustain them? How do you ensure that the environment for doing business for our MSME is enhanced? These are issues that we need to look at. I'm glad that those sectors have been identified, but we need to ensure that whatever supply constraints we have on the way, we level them as much as possible. Now, beyond what the federal is doing, it is important for the states to roll their sleeves as quickly as possible. We all know that FARC collections, they're going to significantly disappear. So how do states begin to generate revenue within themselves to ensure that they can take charge of their demands? So currently, we're going into the recession with challenge of health on our hands. We need to work on our health sector to ensure that at least people don't fall sick and we don't have a double dip at the end of this COVID-19. We need to ensure that our agri work so that we don't have a full crisis on our hands. If we can deal with the health sector and deal with agri and then allow the MSMEs to work better, maybe we will not have as much challenges as it's been projected.
Mr. Jaiyeola, certainly, and thank you for this initial analysis, and we will talk about this a lot more, but I actually want to get your views on the current lockdown situation that we're in. Now, it's been said by many people that really and truly the economic effects of COVID-19 are more likely to kill a lot of people than the coronavirus itself. Now, let's take Nigeria's situation, because many countries around the world are now thinking of easing their lockdowns and actually reopening parts of their economy. We can take our neighbors in Ghana. We can go over to the United States of America, where Donald Trump is talking about reopening the economy. But this is also because a lot of countries have been able to have a certain level of testing capacity and also capacity to treat people, to the point where they can now actually know how many people that they have to treat, or kind of plan more for their life going forward and for their post-COVID life. But here in Nigeria, we have not really had that situation. We have not ramped up testing capacity. We don't really know what our post-COVID life is going to be. What are your thoughts on the easing of a lockdown? Do you think this is something that should happen anytime soon?
Well, those who say we should ease the lockdown have significant reasons to demanding for that. Because if you look at the bulk of our labor force, many of them are either daily paid workers or weekly paid workers. And therefore, if they are denied access to going to work, then COVID might be the problem without, hunger will be the problem within. So it's important for us to begin to look at that. Again, because some of the areas where we have the slums we have around us, especially in this Lagos, one will wonder whether really people have been practicing social distancing or physical distancing. So the cry for people to say we partially begin to open our economy is not unfounded. At the same time, people who are saying that don't open up are concerned about the rise that we're seeing in the number of infected people. Yesterday, I think we had the largest, right? So we're now crossed over 700. And there is a fear and concern that as we begin to roll out our testing kits, which we just begin to do. As a matter of fact, we've done very poorly there. But now it's evident that states like Lagos are rolling out, and we're hearing Kano, and other states are trying to see how they can roll out faster. But then, regardless of how fastly we can do, locking down people for the next 1-2 weeks calls for a lot of concern. So I think it's a balance that we need to look at. Let's look at areas where we can allow people to go out. And I'll tell you this. Look at the area of, this is a farming season. How do we ensure that our farmers are not denied going to farm? Otherwise, later in the year, we might have food crisis. Inflation figure was just released, and you saw the significant spike, the spike in food inflation of over 14%. If this continues to go up, we'll have challenges. So I think it's a balance that we must look at very, very sincerely. Ghana could open up because Ghana did sufficient testing. They've done over 60,000 testing. They are waiting for 15,000 results. And in all of that they did, they had less than 1,000 infected people. So it's important for us to balance the two. But I would rather say, let's err on the part of caution. Let's allow people to gradually ease to the market, into the economic sector, and then let's make sure that we practice safe, social distancing. On my own part, I will say, even when we go out, cover your nose, cover your face, and make sure that you just don't go out unguarded.
Well, I'd like to take you back to what you said earlier on about state governments and your observation that FARC allocations may disappear, particularly now that Brent crude is $19, and well, Bonnet is not yet in negative territory, but Brent crude is $19, and there may be need for us to even rework the budget and change the benchmark for the budget 2020. But what options will you recommend to these state governments, considering the fact that many states, even before COVID-19, appear to be unviable? They are not centers of any production or creativity. The basic thing they all do every month is to go and collect their share of revenue in Abuja. Now, how can these states survive post-COVID-19? Do you have any suggestions for them?
Well, in the short run, it's going to be tough, and we shouldn't kid ourselves. Now, each time I hear people say that states are not viable, the question what I ask myself is that, is it that they are unwilling to be viable, or they lack the opportunity to be viable?
Oh, maybe both.
Every state in Nigeria have the opportunity to be viable. But because we all have gotten used to going to Abuja every month to collect what is directly us, I won't blame anybody, it's the allocation of Nigerian resources. We've not paid significant attention to all that we can do. Look, it will not come in month 1, month 2, month 3. It will take consistent planning. First and foremost, we all need to see now at our very state level and look at our budget. How many of this is needful? There will be a significant cutting of cost. I mean, there are monies we spend on recurrent expenditure that we don't need to spend. That's first. Secondly, in doing our capital expenditure, we will begin to ask ourselves, how do we drive private capital? I always tell people, there is a lot of money sitting everywhere in the world that are attracting negative yield that are going to other areas. Why are they not coming to Nigeria? Very simple. The environment for doing business is still very, very harsh, and we need to work on it. I commend what PBEC is doing, but we're not doing enough. So we need to ensure power. Thankfully, subsidy in fuel is gone. I hope subsidies in power is gone. I hope we will rightly price our naira so that people that want to bring money will see value. So state government should look at where they have core competencies. Agric is still the best thing to do. But if you look at agric today, the yield per acre is very poor. We have poor seedlings. Fertilizers don't get to people on time. So we don't sequence what we need to do appropriately.
Well, Mr.
So we need to sequence.
Mr. Jaiyeola, sorry to interrupt you. We need to take a short commercial break. When we return, we'll come back to you and the conversation will continue. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News Channel. Still with us is Laoye Jaiyeola, Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Mr. Jaiyeola, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Well, before we went on break, you were, making a number of suggestions for state governments with regard to post-COVID-19 economic management. And you were talking about agriculture before we took that short commercial break. If you may just continue on that note.
Yes, I was talking about the need for us to pay attention to agriculture. I know currently we have issues with the variety of seeds, the quality of seeds. About last year, NESD did some research, and we found out that people don't even plant the right seed. And fertilizers are poor. There are a lot of fake fertilizers in the market. But even having done that, when you have a yield, when you have good yield, Nigeria should begin to go to where we are doing light manufacturing. You see, unless there is value addition to our agriculture, our farmers will be poor. If you look at the data, agri account for about 22-25% of the GDP, but the bulk of that is crop production. And given the fact that commodity prices are subject to vagaries of up and down movement, we don't get the best seed. It's so bad that Nigeria will export cocoa and then bring in back chocolate. We'll export our hides and skin and import leather. We need to get to a point when we begin to process these things. And let nobody say there are no power. Look, we're doing a lot with renewable energy. We can still do better. So how do we organize the states? It doesn't have to be one state. A couple of states can come together and create what is called a special processing zone. And we have good agricultural yield, and you can give them light, and you preserve a lot of the wastages we lose due to post-harvest losses. A lot of work needs to be done. For the next 6 months to 1 year is going to be tough. Usually, we don't go through the tough trough before the economic the oil spikes back. When we had the challenge in 2016, that we should have done the key thing that we've been asking for. Price of oil went up, and we all forgot this thing. I hope that this time we will not forget it. I hope that we will roll our sleeves and do the things we need to state. But obviously, every state we need to cut their cloth according their coat according to their, not even to their size, but according to the clothes they have.
Mr. Jaiyeola, certainly. Now, let's also look at a more positive side to things and post-COVID effects on businesses and what businesses should prioritize. We've seen a lot of changes and a lot of shifts in terms of what industries are booming in the world right now and what industries are not, what industries are important in the world right now and what industries are not. One thing is clear is that the fourth industrial revolution has pushed its way forward way sooner than a lot of countries expected. How can Nigeria turn lemons into lemonade at this point in time? How can businesses refocus to become a part of this fourth industrial revolution that really and truly is controlling our world now?
There's a lot of talk about the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, the second one, the third one we're missing. Look, whilst I still believe that we can take advantage of development in the fourth industrial revolution, we still have to go through the very basic ones of light manufacturing. Look, believe you me, the bulk of our people live in the rural area. They go into agric, but we're still not making. I mean, we're not turning our ginger to ginger that can be exported. So let's while we work on the big issues around the fourth industrial revolution, we should take it step by step. There are brilliant people there that are control. A lot of people are doing a lot of things around the IT sector. People are doing 3D printing. We commend that. But the bulk of our people, because we're a highly labor-intense nation, we still have to play the small, light industry thing that we're doing. So the two of them can work hand in hand. Let those who can take us to scale in those industrial revolutions do that. In fact, one of the things I would really say we should begin to experiment, and government need to do that very quickly, is that how do we leverage on technology? We have good enough guys around in technology. How do we take technology into business that allow for efficiency, transparency, and disclosure? How do we take transparency into the way we run government that allows for transparency and disclosure? How do we remove rent-seeking opportunities that will allow us to have significant efficiency? We can cut a lot of losses. And, you know, so we don't have a choice in the matter. And I think we are up to it as a nation. All we need to do is for us to be determined and be focused on what we want to do. It is not about plans to doing those things, but it's about our willingness and our readiness and our commitment to see them through. And what I only urge everybody, whether you're in the private sector, whether in the public sector, let us stop mounting all that we talk about. Let us implement, and see whatever we're seeing through. Whether you are talking about the old second industrial revolution, whether we're talking about fourth industrial revolution, it's time for us to roll our sleeves and do the dirty work.
Well, one of the fallouts of the fact that there's demand shock, there is supply shock, small and medium-scale enterprises are shut down, is that the world faces the prospect of unemployment, either during COVID or even after COVID. And here in Nigeria, the small and medium-scale enterprises, they seem to be in very serious trouble. Now, what would you recommend to the Nigerian government, maybe now or post-COVID, to save jobs, to reduce unemployment? Because even before COVID-19, unemployment was about 23%. And now the figures would get really worse. Now, what should government do in this regard? And if there is going to be a bailout, what specific sectors of the economy do you think government should provide direct bailout for? Say aviation, for example, as has been done in the United States. And then, of course, in the United Kingdom, there's a focus on small and medium-scale businesses.
Well, thank you very much. There's no doubt that the MSME sector are the largest employers of labor in Nigeria. The last work done by the Bureau of Statistics show that they account for as much as 85% of Nigeria labor force. Now, you did allude to the fact that about 23% unemployment, but when you add underemployment to it, we're in the 40% range. And when we talk about poverty, people are poor. So what should they do? First and foremost, how do you ensure that that man who is sewing, whatever it is doing, that have only 6 hours of light, get more hours of light so that they can sew more? How do you ensure that when they need permits, to make sure that they roll out whatever it is that are enhancing, those permits are done for them on time? How do you ensure that the multiplicity of taxes now that goes on in all the states and local government, if you speak with the MSME people, they will tell you that taxes and levies, depending on the state you talk about, rolls into about 30-something. A state that have done well with their tax reform is Kaduna State. How do you ensure that we streamline all those things so that people are not disturbing them? I hear the governor of the central bank has had some plan to roll out money to the MSME sector. We need to give them as much money as we can give them. I am one person that don't believe that you give money to households, because in times like this, if you give money to a household and people are unsure, they will not spend that money, they will save it. But if you want to reflate the economy, there is a school of thought that said, give money to businesses. And how do you give money to businesses? Let them have access to loans. I salute the forbearances around the interest payment, but let us again ensure that not only do you provide this money, access to it is quick, it's on time. I mean, you alluded to what is being done in the United States. One of the complaints people have is that the Congress passed the law, but people are not accessing it as quickly as they should access it. We should make access to loan very, very easy. I commend what we're doing around security around it, but believe you me, it is the environment for doing business. Let us remove the bottlenecks. Let us make sure we do whatever it is we can get power to work. Look, there's been clamor around the need for us to pay the right tariff for power or not. I'm one person that will tell you we don't need to allow estimated billing, but let us meter people and let them pay the right prices for power and roll our power to people, to the entire nation. It is possible for us to have regular supply of power if we work on the sector. So government should hasten whatever they are doing around the power sector very, very quickly. We should leverage on technology and make sure we put our MSME together and come up with bundles of options that will make the ease and the cost of their doing business very, very easy. And we should ensure that we are careful with our taxes. These are times when regulatory agencies must actually be facilitators of businesses, not there to begin to earn income. Sometimes you hear that regulatory agencies are being asked to bring money, and then wonder, are you facilitating business, or you are just looking for money? Because look, if these businesses don't thrive and don't make more money, our taxes are small. More time we worry about how to share what is in the center, rather worry about how to bake more so that we have more pie to share. So those are my very initial intervention that I will say we need to do quickly and consistently.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jaiyeola. On that note, we'll take another short commercial break and then we'll come back to you. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Mr. Laoye Jaiyeola, the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, is still here with us on the program. Thank you for staying with us, Mr. Jaiyeola. Would you like to conclude on your thoughts before we go on to the next question?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay.
I was asking you if you would like to conclude on your thoughts before we go on to the next question.
No, so what I'm just trying to say is that there are good practices within the states that people should leverage on. And some of the discussions we're having with the Governors Forum is, look, some states are doing good things, copy them right now. And one of the things we can do is to let them share experiences so that we will move forward. Enough of talking. It's real time for implementation. And happily, the reality of now is showing us that there's a new normal and we cannot continue to do business as usual.
Certainly, Mr. Jaiyeola, I could not agree with you more. There is a new normal, and we actually have to look at the way forward. One thing is clear, which you also pointed out at the start of this conversation, is that there are several institutional voids that we have in Nigeria that we are now seeing, and clearly there are ways to be filled. Especially in healthcare, we have several institutional voids that have become extremely clear to us with the coronavirus pandemic. So I would like to ask you, going forward, post-COVID, what exactly exactly is the role of social businesses across Nigeria? Because social entrepreneurship has shown around the world to play a huge role in filling institutional voids. Take India, for example, where the Narayana Health City has become one of the largest healthcare centers in India, especially for heart treatments. And it's all at the same price, all affordable, yet premium, and it's been able to work. So social entrepreneurship does have a role, or do you disagree?
Well, no, I actually can agree with you, analyze. And if you look at it, there are a couple of those sparking up in Nigeria. But what has happened is that the scale is what we haven't done that much. And a lot of those things have not come to scale because as a nation, as states, we haven't paid particular attention to it. And I'll give you one very good example. It's not that the capacity for Nigeria to deploy the broadband is there. But we have not deployed broadband because what? People are talking of right of ways. And this has been on the table for long. Now, you all know that if internet is rolled across the nation, it has significant implication for financial inclusion. It has implication for telemedicine. It has implication for even the quality of learning in our schools. So there's room for everybody to do work. So that's what we're saying. Government should just concentrate as much as possible on how to facilitate the business and make those conditions good enough that whether it is being social, we can do it. Now, I've seen a lot of work that the private sector is done in this COVID, and I'm glad that part of their interest is to ensure that it's not only about COVID now, but how do we ensure that we increase our health facility stock after now? And that is what I want to urge them to make sure it continues. You'll be surprised the work that the social tech people have done during this COVID. Sometimes I'm amazed. And we should ensure that it's not something we stop. It's something that we harness. I will make sure it continues. And anyway, the reality of where we are going to shows that we need all hands on deck.
Well, you are president of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, which is a think tank involving both the public sector and the private sector. Has there been any attempt by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group as a think tank to make some inputs directly into these efforts by governments at all levels to resolve the challenges of COVID-19? Or we need to wait till the summit holds, if it will hold this year, depending on what happens with COVID-19?
What I want to assure you is that we are not waiting. Usually, the think tank is usually a silent partner. We involve all the way through, not only with the government at the center, we're involved with what is it that's been done with all the state government through the instrumentality of the Nigerian Government Forum. We're submitting, we're involved in enhancing and putting together the private sector. All of these are going on and right now. We've even gone ahead to begin to look at post-COVID. How do we begin to look at our economy? So we're involved in discussions with all the various people, both at the federal, at the state levels, and with the business level. Currently, a study is going on what happened to MSMEs after. We've been beginning to learn something from what is happening to educational institutions during this COVID, and what are the lessons we need to carry forward. So it's not about the summit only in October. Like I do tell Nigeria, summit in October is a flagship. That's why we come out to the public. A lot of engagement, a lot of work goes on all year round through our policy commission, which is the public-private dialogue. It's involved private sector people and government sector people. Do they listen? They listen. Do they implement? That's a big question. The implementation of all that we talk about is what we need to look. And I was glad when the Minister of Finance did say one thing, that if only we have implemented 30% of what is it that we come up with annually, we will be a better nation. So it's time to do implementation. I give you an instance for this COVID. A lot of people are donating money, but how do you ensure proper coordination that what people are buying and what is the need? If you look at it, we didn't do enough testing because maybe we didn't appropriately sequence the issue. But if you listen to NCDC, they're talking about testing, contract chasing, isolation before ventilators. So people were busy looking for how do we get ventilators. People are already looking at how do we ensure that we do palliatives. All these discussions we have with them. We're discussing with them. We'll continue the discussion. And if the environment permits, we'll carry on to our summit. But it is not only at the summit that we do the engagement.
Certainly, implementation is key. Now, one thing I would definitely like to ask you during the course of this conversation, as we do come to a close in a couple minutes' time, is what advice do you have at this point in time for small and medium-scale business owners who, unfortunately, especially really in industries like hospitality, travel, aviation, whatever the case may be, but small and medium-scale business owners who are really hit by the economic effects of coronavirus? What advice would you give to those people at this point in time?
Well, this is a time when we need to learn from each other. You know, sometimes when you sit alone, you think that you're alone going through the problems you're going through. But there's a need for us to begin to share experiences. And we're talking with, for instance, in any age, we have a community for MSMEs. That is a coalition of all the MSME groups in Nigeria. And so what we tell them is, let's share our experiences. Sometimes there are things we're doing that we need to redo very, very well. I tell people cash is king. Keep your cash and be sure that you're not wasting your cash at a time like this. Again, there's a need for us to begin to think outside the box. I see people who were doing things for the very top of the range line in the garment industry who are then rethinking and say, look, we can do face masks and a few things. And which are doing now. So you need to begin to think and be a bit more creative. Spend less, think more, work in coalition, learn good practices, leverage on technology to make sure that you save money and be always on your toes. That's what I would advise that you do in times like this.
Well, I mean, in the course of this conversation, you have used the phrase, the new normal, about 3 or 4 times. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, is it possible for you to define what that new normal is likely to be in specific terms post-COVID? Is it a new normal in terms of social relations, or a new normal in terms of how economies are managed, or a new normal in terms of lessons that countries and individuals and institutions would necessarily have to learn?
Believe you me, a new normal in all those areas you've talked about. Until the social distancing, many of us didn't know that we can sit and work from home. And so people are looking and say, look, is it very economic to put my people in office or they can even work from home? That's a new normal. A new normal in terms of our earnings. We used to stay and think only oil. Now money is gone. In some areas, it's negative. People are just keeping the production up because they can shut down. So a new normal in terms of our social relationships. So in all phrases, and the unfortunate thing is that even the new normal is not crystallizing yet. It's just unfolding. And then in terms of our supply structures, even if you are a multinational and you want to import your intermediary goods, how are you sure you're going to get it quickly? Any normal in terms of the need to do significant backward integration. Any normal in terms of how do you do local content and stop talking about it and begin to implement it. I am amazed at what Nigerians are doing in terms of it. But let's just make sure we keep up with it, do it. It's going to be evolving, and it's going to evolve. Let's learn the lessons. And when we learn the lessons, let us implement. Because if you fail to implement it, what was good yesterday, today may not be good tomorrow. And those are the new normal. So the new normal is evolving, but what I say is that it's not the way it used to be. And in closing, I'll tell you a few things that I'm beginning to ask our people, even in the higher institutions. If you look at those in the education sector, primary, secondary, people are now doing online. The government was doing significant things on radio about how to ensure that these children that are locked in the house are not just left in the house. So they are teaching them through radio. They are asking them to do television. A number of people are making use of, okay, look, I'm in my house now talking to you. Before now, you'll have asked me to come to the studio. So it's a new normal. So there's a new normal all around. And we must take advantage of that and use it. What's important is that we need to cut costs. We need to be very efficient in the way we use our money. We need to network together and stop talking and implement. Because what is good today may be obsolete tomorrow.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. On that note, we'll bring this conversation to a close. And we thank you very much for making out the time to be part of the morning show today.
We certainly do.